Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Michael Nelson. Michael is an entrepreneur, author, ultra-marathoner, and a real estate investor, and he's the author of Goals That Matter, the deceptively simple system to achieve every dream. Michael, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Great to be here, Howard. Thanks.
I really appreciate the introduction that was made by a good friend of ours, Karen Briscoe, and she is just, as we were chatting earlier, and you called it out, she was a dynamo.
Yes, she is.
And I can only imagine the folks that she interacts with. So I have no doubt, and just kind of hearing about being an ultra marathoner, it's like the only runner I've ever seen, Michael, is one. It's never been a smiler. He's never smiled. So, so I have to ask you, do you smile when you're doing your marathons?
At certain points of them, yes, especially crossing that finish line.
Fantastic.
The funny thing is I actually wrote a lot of the book in my head while running. It's some of the best mind time that I have.
You know, I think that's wonderful. You know, when I drive, I don't have the radio on, but I use it as time to think about things that are going on, what I want to accomplish. And I love the fact that you've just shared that, because I'm curious, what do other marathoners, ultra marathoners do while they're running? And I think that's a great story. First, I have to ask, what is an ultra marathoner?
So basically, an ultra marathon is anything over a regular marathon. Typical is 50K, 100K, 50 miles, or 100 miles.
Oh my God.
And I'm doing 50K. So it's about 32 to 33 miles is a typical race.
Okay.
And they're almost always trail. And that's what I changed. My first marathon, I did that when my trainer got me running, was the original marathon from Marathon to Athens, which is where it got its name. And it was all street, painful as all get up. That day I decided, okay, I want to try an ultra marathon, and ended up booking the first one we did, which was in the jungles of Nepal the next year. And we've done a destination race every year since. And one of our goals is to do an ultra marathon on every continent. So we've got 4 down and 3 more to go.
I think that's fantastic. And just the idea that you are off the pavement, I would think, you know, comfort-wise, I mean, it's a long journey, but just the running, the comfort of just being on, you know, off the pavement, it's got to feel much better. Yeah.
It does. And the thing about trail running is it's not flat. So you're using all these different muscles. So you're never on the flat surfaces, it's your quads, and they're just nailed. With the ultras, with the trail, you're moving all the time. So it's a real different experience on the body.
Very interesting. Now you really have me thinking, you know, maybe that's something I could do. I would probably start out with a quarter mile, and we'll go from there.
That's how I started. 1 minute running, 1 minute walking.
I love it.
Did that for 10 minutes and then built it up to an ultra.
I love it. Yeah. So, Michael, before we kind of dive into the book, Goals That Matter, I would love if you could share with our listeners some of your background, because it's very interesting. It's you know, you've been involved in some areas that, you know, there's a lot of information coming in, a lot of insights, and you know, till you got to this point where you're writing a book on goals. And so tell us a little bit about your backstory.
So I started off, my first life was a school teacher. I actually, right out of college, threw everything into a backpack and moved to Hawaii. I'd done my junior year abroad in Bordeaux, and I fell in love with travel. My parents really instilled it in me. And in Hawaii, I started substitute teaching. Came back and started substitute teaching in Sacramento, and then got a job, got hired full-time, ended up getting a computer lab. And in 1995, I built a website for the school. This was that was even before Netscape. So I don't even remember the browser back then, but so we built the website, and a friend of my dad said, hey, would you build one for my business? And I had no idea what to charge him. I said, okay, $125. And he said, no, that's not enough. I'm going to give you more. Was the cheapest man I had ever met in my life. And he said he was going to get me more. I'm like, hey, this might be something. So I ended up deciding to start a web design business. And my goal was I would spend 2 years growing it up, and then I would be making enough money I could quit teaching. And as it turns out, I started it in September of 95. We grew. So by December, I had to drop down to half-time teaching. And by April, I had 2 full-time employees, and I was going into the office. I was teaching from 6 to 1 and then going into the office after that. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So I had to quit. Went into the business full time. And remember, this is back in the .com days. It was just explosive.
Right.
We went from 7 to 32 people in a couple of years, did all of that on cash flow, which is really, really painful to do. It was a tiger by the tail. And ultimately, when the .bomb hit about 2001, I lost absolutely everything. We had grown, we got a line of credit to help with the growth. And then when things got weird, a lot of contracts started canceling. And we had made some bad decisions. I had made some bad decisions. So looked up, I'm 39 years old, literally had lost everything in my life. And I had put everything into that business. So by the time I came out of it, I was overweight. At the time, I was a raging alcoholic. I had lost a lot of my friends. My life was completely out of balance because I had put everything into that business. Took some time to reflect, went back to teaching for a year, figured out once you've been an entrepreneur on your own, there's no way you can ever go back to being an employee. So licked my wounds for that year and then started my next business, which I still have today. But that loss is really what colored the rest of my life. And it really set, when I started this business, this one is TLC Tech. We're an outsourced IT firm. We help companies do their digital transformation. When I started it, I vowed I was going to do it differently. I wasn't going to let it consume my life. So I was going to take time off. I was going to do all these things. And I had some really good goals, and I probably wrote them down. Fast forward about 7 years, I took one of my first vacations. So I was not real good about striking that balance. And I had finally built enough. I had several employees by then. We were doing well, and I could afford to take the time off. And we were making a little bit of money, so I could actually afford to travel as well. And on that beach, I went to Puerto Rico, and on the beach, I started looking at my life and what matters and where my life was. And I had started back into some old habits. I was grinding. I was working a lot. I was spending too much time in the business, and other areas of my life were out of balance.
Michael, let me interrupt for 1 second. So when you're on the beach, which in Puerto Rico cannot be a bad thing.
No.
So as you were kind of taking stock of what matters, this is what you were coming away with is I'm going back and I'm repeating these patterns?
Yeah. So I really looked at 6 main areas of my life and where I was in them. What I found out is I was lacking. And it's one of the exercises in the book it's called the Wheel of Life exercise, where you look at the 6 that, it's a great exercise because it just gives you focus on deciding what matters and finding out where you're at in your life.
Let's talk about the Wheel of Life. For our listeners, there's going to be coaches out there, other entrepreneurs that will have heard of that. But why don't you share a little bit about what the Wheel of Life is?
So basically, it's the way I have it presented is it's in 6 main areas where you're covering kind of family, friends, relationship, your spirituality, contribution, being of service, physical health, nutrition, personal intellectual learning, the adventure lifestyle. And then for me, I made the last one career, business, and financial, because that's where I was focusing all of my attention. And I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs. That's why I intentionally put it as the last item, because we're all really good at that. It's the other areas we're lacking. And so in the Wheel of Life, you identify on a scale of 1 to 10 where you feel you are in that area of your life. Are you completely whole? Are you doing it well? If so, you're at a 10. If you're not, you're at a 1. So the Wheel of Life is that you map 1 to 10, and then you draw a line across the circle to identify where you are. The goal is you're going to have a fairly rounded circle, because that way your life rolls well. What we find is a lot of people are out of balance. And so you've got this really janky wheel that doesn't roll well. And that leads to our life being out of balance, which leads ultimately to unhappiness and lack of fulfillment.
Okay.
And so that's really what came to me on that beach.
So once this personal aha moment, this moment of insight came to you, what did you do next? I mean, how did you then begin to kind of take ownership of what was out of whack or even what was working and could also be better? But how did you begin to take ownership and turn those items around?
So what I did is I took these 6 areas, kind of divided up, and just wrote down, what do I want to do? How can I improve? How can I get better? And ultimately, some turned out to be dreams, some turns out to be goals. And the only difference between a dream and a goal is dreams aren't smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-based. So I wrote all of these out, kind of had this big master plan. And that's where it can get a little bit dicey. Is it's like, okay, here's all these things I want to do. And we're all good at writing things that we want to do, but then you've got to turn them into actionable items. Some of them were really big goals, some were small. A lot were around health, around exercise. That's when I ended up starting at that point. I really wasn't exercising much. So I put a goal around getting into better health. But getting into better health is just, it's a little too broad. It has to be chunked down into actionable items. So that's where I started, is I just mapped out, hey, here's all the things, the areas that I could do improvement. And I kind of let that sit and stew for a while. And ultimately, that sheet became what I call my what matters sheet. And that's part of the system in the book, is you sit down and you identify what matters in your life. What are your goals? What are your dreams? What do you want to achieve? Just pie is the pie in the sky. Everything's available. Just write it down. Get it down on the what matters sheet. And then you can go through the next part of the system will take them through a way to identify whether it's a goal, whether it's a dream, when do you want to achieve it by, what steps you need to take to get there. So it really, the key from once you identify what matters is getting it chunked down, getting it into some actionable items that you can take basic steps on a regular basis, moving you towards your bigger goals. That process, getting that process developed, that was about a 3-year process from the time on the beach to the time I had really started working with my goals on a real regular basis, like I do today, which is an everyday basis today.
When you began to document this, write these things down, figure out what's the goal versus the dream, chunking it up, were you in this journey by yourself? Did you have help? How did you begin to, get feedback about that, or to, for folks to maybe get some clarifying questions or push back a little bit?
So I've been really blessed that I've been surrounded by a lot of good people. At the time, I had a business coach. I also was involved in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, which is for entrepreneurs. Both of those were areas that I got good feedback, and one of the biggest is accountability. And that's I say over and over and over in the book, the 2 most important things are regular review and accountability. So I knew I had a book in me, but I didn't know at the time what it was going to be about. And ultimately, over about a 3-year process, I was really modifying the system, getting it kind of tweaked out. And I'd look at it monthly, maybe once a week. And I was making good progress. But in 2016, I read Hal Elrod's The Miracle Morning.
Okay.
And it just really, really resonated with me. So I started that daily practice of doing the Miracle Morning. But I added my goal sheet so that every single day I started looking at my goals. My life changed.
Wow.
That's when things absolutely changed for me.
And I'm curious too, it's just a small curiosity, is when you are looking at your goals and have this sheet, do you have like a journal book? Are the goals plastered up on the window on a flip chart? How are you visiting those goals every day?
So ultimately, the GTM system drills down into a 1-page sheet. And on that sheet are your affirmations, your why, And then it breaks it 10-year, 3-year, 1-year, quarterly, monthly, and weekly goals. So the way that I do the system is every week I print out an accountability sheet with what I'm going to accomplish this week. I take, at the end of each week, I look at my monthly, my quarterly, and my annual goals and see if I need to chunk down a step into the week or the month. So it's this constant evolution of moving, chunking down your goals throughout the year, moving you towards them.
Okay. When you began to create the system and you began to think, there's a, there's an opportunity here to help others. And I know, for our listeners, Michael has a very, in addition to his IT life, he has this life of a coach, and he helps others, individuals, teams, I would imagine. When did this idea come to fruition of there's a book here, and then also there's an opportunity to help others? Because we're perhaps your friends, colleagues, peers, employees, were they starting to see some differences in you and say, Michael, what's going on here?
So it's funny. It was serendipity, and this is one of my favorite stories. I had seen my brother in New York City, and it was like January, February, and he was extremely unhappy, very dissatisfied with his life. And I said, "Hey, read Miracle Morning." He'd read it, and then he wanted to do some work. And I said, "Could I come out and visit you, and we could work on this?" And I said, "Great." I happened to go away to a mastermind retreat, and they asked a question: what in your life is looking to end, and what is looking to begin? And then we broke out into groups. And I just made a presentation about goals to my EO group. And I had my goal sheet. I call it my accountability sheet. And I shared it with this breakout group. And they all said, I want that. I want that. Could you show that? Could you give that to me? And it was at this meeting, at this mastermind retreat, that it hit me that that was the book and that I needed to develop this system a little more. Came up with the name Goals That Mattered, registered the domain name, started kind of mapping out how I was going to do this. Came home on a Thursday, got home at 4. My brother arrived at 6. I picked him up at the airport, and he said, my life I'm done. I said, what do you mean? His wife of 24 years had asked him for a divorce the day before.
Wow.
And he was just miserable. And we talked about it, and I pointed out, you were not happy with your life. You get to plan your life differently now. And we spent the next 3 days building his new life and kind of building out the system, the 3 main sheets that I use. It's you identify what matters, then you build a life by design, and then you have an accountability sheet. And so we did this and kind of built the system, built out his dream life. And what he did over the next year was one of the most amazing transformations I've ever seen somebody go through. He just changed his life and now has the life by design. He has his dream life. And that was really the impetus that went, I've got to get this out. I need to share this.
Fantastic.
And so a year after that, we went to I had rented a house down in Costa Rica on the beach for a week with him and my parents. And we just started brainstorming out ideas for the book. And that's kind of how it all started.
That's fantastic. And thinking about your brother, and I love the fact that, there's obviously the family bond, but being able to support each other, in that time of need. And other folks that are reading the book, picking it up, what are they saying about it?
That it's starting to change their lives. And that's, I also, over the last several years, as I was writing the book, I led a fair number of people, a couple of hundred people through what I called Goals That Matter Live. And I'd lead them through 2 coaching sessions. We'd do it in a group, working them through the system. And the changes that it made in people's lives who made the practice of the regular review and accountability. And that's really what it comes down to. You read a lot of books, so do I. There's always actionable things that you need to do. We don't always do those. Sometimes we just take away a few of the good ideas. But the people that went through this embraced it and made it part of their daily practice. Uh, I call it habit stacking. The best thing somebody can do is to take a daily habit they already have and stack this on top of it so that it is easy. It takes no intention. It takes no energy to get it done. And you just make this part of your daily review and you have accountability. It will, and that's what I hear back from people consistently. If they do those two things, it literally changes their lives.
So with your the two critical components, the review and the accountability, the frequent review, how are your clients, or what are your suggestions for keeping that accountability? Because we don't always have the opportunity to work with Michael Nelson or another
Right.
accountability like coach. But what are your recommendations for them? Because accountability, that's a tough one unless somebody is out there helping you along. That can be tough.
And the best way to do it is to find somebody that you help each other and find an accountability partner. You don't need an accountability coach. You need an accountability partner. And I've had one for years. It's the guy that I hired originally was my trainer, who's become one of my best friends. But you can find an accountability partner anywhere. If the book really resonated with you, give the copy to somebody. Ask them if they would be interested in being an accountability partner. The one thing you don't want to do is not somebody in your family. You don't want it to be a familial. It does not work with a spouse. That's right. Not going to work. You need to enroll your spouse in what you're doing, but you don't want to have your spouse be your accountability partner. Somebody at work who is moving ahead. Somebody at work who shows kind of that same ethic that you have. Joining a meetup around an interest that you have, especially if it's around health. If you cycle, if you run, if you do this, the person that shows up regularly keeps their commitments. If you work out in the gym, the person that you see there regularly that's consistently working out. There's a lot of different places you can do it. You can also go to the website, go to the Facebook group, post that you're interested in finding an accountability partner. Find it that way. It doesn't have to be somebody like you. It just needs to be somebody that's committed to achieving their goals, and you meet on a weekly basis. You talk, it takes 10 minutes. In the book, I suggest while you're building that muscle memory and you're building your goal achieving muscle, text each other every day, read my accountability sheet. Do that for 30 days, just as you're building that muscle. Check in once a week, same time, same day, every week. Do that without fail. Review your accountability sheet on a daily basis. Your life will change.
That's fantastic. And I have to share as I'm listening to you. So I have the pleasure of waking up to the sunrise every morning here in Las Vegas with a cup of, and I enjoy it with a cup of coffee. What's missing is I go right from that sunrise and coffee to the shower to sit down and do my work, my coaching work or my podcasting. And what I need is to attach to that to that activity, the accountability of going walking or exercising. And I think, I think I need an accountability partner that I can go walk with.
And I tell you, what the changes that it does. So some people call me a freak for this, but early on, food was really a thing. And left to my own devices, I can eat poorly.
Oh, yeah.
Training for running, it's really critical. So about 3 years ago, I told my trainer, I want to have accountability around food. Could we text each other? I'm going to text you what I'm going to eat. And he said, great, I'll do the same. For 3 years now, we text each other every single thing we eat. You want to talk about a level of accountability. Now, I don't eat perfect. I actually had a slice of cake last night. But I got to tell you, before I bit into that, I thought, I'm going to have to text Josh about this.
Right.
And it's just that extra level of accountability, knowing, we get into our own heads. And boy, can we justify. One of my greatest lines from AA is, stay out of your head. There's no adult supervision in there.
Right.
We can make ourselves believe anything. And having an accountability partner forces us to really think twice about how we do things.
Very good.
And holds us accountable. That's the best thing.
Very good. What are some other key takeaways that you'd want to share with our listeners about the contents within the book, Goals That Matter?
There's some good life hacks in there. I talk a lot about building habits. There's it's kind of based around 10 principles in life and then 8 habits that you need to get into. Achieving goals really can take a lot of energy if you don't do it well. One of the things, I've got a lot of life hacks, and they're about things that you can do to minimize the energy required. Just little things like goal in the live sessions that I did. For a lot of people, food is a huge thing, and when they're going out to a restaurant, you're going out with friends, it's the end of the day, you're going out to dinner, you're tired, it's been a rough day. The amount of energy it takes to stick to a program is really hard. So a little hack: in the morning, when you got the energy, go download the menu, decide what you're going to have, write it down, and when you get to the restaurant, don't even take a menu. You don't even have to expend any energy. So there's ways to conserve the energy all throughout the day, keep that energy battery full, because we are going to come up against times that we want to do our goals, but we're tired. And you've got to have that. If you have that extra little energy in your battery, you have a much better chance of achieving that goal that day.
That's amazing. And I'm like, I really have to, again, sunrise is at 5 o'clock or 5:30. I need to get up at 4, potentially go for that walk. But I'll deal with that. I can deal with that.
I'll tell you, The Miracle Morning, if you haven't read that book, it's one of the ones I recommend the most. It really sets a good daily routine.
I want to go out and check out the book, and we'll put a backlink to that book as well as to your book, Goals That Matter, within the show notes. As you look back, Michael, in your life, I mean, you had the travel bug, you've been an entrepreneur, business owner, and just a lot of variety in your life. As you look back, what would you tell your early Michael self? What would you tell him?
It doesn't require as many hours as you thought. One of the things I'm finding out now, I with the 2 different businesses early on, I grinded. I did 60, 80-hour weeks. Once I got better balance in my life and I was more focused on my goals, I could do in 30 hours what used to take me 60. Now, I also have a really incredible team, and that really helps. But you can really have everything you want and a lot of balance in your life. And actually, that balance is what makes it easier to achieve things with less time.
Very good. Very good. And I know when we ask our guests to join us on the podcast, we ask for insights to go. And I love we've already shared about the 2 critical components of the system is the review and accountability. But I love what you just shared, because that in of itself is an insight. So we definitely appreciate that. For your ideal, client, avatar, whatever you want to call them, who are you marketing this book, and who would you like to come into your system to get to know this work? I mean, we can all benefit from it, but is there a particular kind of individual? What are they going through that this book is really, they've got the issue and here's the solution, here's the opportunity?
So this started for me with other entrepreneurs. That was kind of my beginning audience. It morphed a little bit to people that have had a certain level of success in their life, and they want to elevate their life to the next level. What I'm finding from the book purchases and the people that are going through tends to weigh 35 to 55 is about the average age. Tends to skew a little more towards men than women. But I've had the people that went through the GTM live sessions were all over the board. A lot of them entrepreneurial, because that's a lot of people from my EO group and some other mastermind groups went through it. But typically it's in that range. But really it goes back to they've had a certain level of success and they want more. They want to elevate their lives. And this gives them a really simple system to do that.
Fantastic. And if folks want to work with you, obviously we're going to point them to the book on the show notes on Amazon, etc. But if they want to learn more about this and they want to start to incorporate this accountability and creating some of these goals and into their lifestyle, how would you suggest they do that working with you?
Goalsthatmatter.com is my website. I'm also on Facebook under Goals That Matter, and Michael Nelson, also on LinkedIn. I've actually made the decision to keep my social limited to those two areas because, again, it's protecting my time, and it's so easy to get into so many different areas. Books available on Amazon.
Very good, very good. Looking forward now, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, what are some of your perhaps future goals that given the work that you're doing now, this transformation from the tech entrepreneur, which again, it's still part of your life, but very much health conscious with the marathoning, the travel, the book, this work. What are some of your future goals that you would be willing to share? I don't want to put you on the spot and you say
no, I love sharing goals. That's that's one of my favorite things. Personal goals for me, one is to run an ultra marathon on every continent. Antarctica is going to be the last one, just because logistically there's a lot to do on that one. I want to visit 100 countries. I'm up to 43 right now.
Oh boy.
I want to, in the next couple of years, I want to touch 100,000 people with the Goals That Matter system. Those are some of the longer term ones. There's things in there, regular things. My folks are in they're about 80s now, doing an annual trip abroad with them. They got me into the love of travel when I was a kid. They pulled us out of school for a year and traveled the United States for a year and taught us.
God bless them.
Oh, you're telling me. So I got this great travel bug, and I want to make sure that I'm taking the time to spend with them while they're still able to do international travel.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Success Insight. I'm so glad Karen introduced us, and really we wish you much success with what your work today, your passion today, and congratulations again about your book, Goals That Matter. The Deceptively Simple System to Achieve Every Dream. And it's just wonderful to kind of get to know you and learn more about your story. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Howard. Really appreciate you having me on.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Michael Nelson, and really just, as a coach, I mean, this topic resonates for me, but what I love about what Michael has shared is this spin and really taking his life experience and that aha moment, on the beach in Puerto Rico, and just beginning to work with his brother, and just really all the things that went into to creating this work and Goals That Matter. And I do want to encourage you to go out to his website, goalsthatmatter.com, and check out the services he provides. He also has a great blog out there, the Goals That Matter blog, and we'll provide the backlinks to it. And as Michael suggested, he's also on Facebook and LinkedIn, and we'll provide you those links as well. So whether you're a coach, an entrepreneur, I hope you kind of geeked out as much as I did, because again, this is just a wonderful topic, and it's so important to create balance and purpose in our lives, to really, focus on not those dreams, as Michael suggested, but the goals that matter. All right, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Do let us know what you thought of today's episode on Success Insight. You can visit our webpage, successinsightpodcast.com. We are also on LinkedIn and Facebook. We have Success Insight Podcast pages there, as well as the major podcasting platforms, especially Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and of course, Spotify, where we will have all of our podcast episodes, but we also have playlists, of which Michael's episode will be on the coaching and consulting playlist, and we will share that off to you as well. Okay, go out, have a phenomenal day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.